Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to the wild Vaughn Manor, where Roger and I have returned for an official announcement. We are officially announcing June on the Range 2024. Yes, June on the Range is returning, my friends. The fantastic reading event where we read Western fiction. Westerns used to be enormously popular. Thousands upon thousands of Westerns were published back in the olden days, but now, well, Westerns are just a shadow of their former selves. But every June, we celebrate them and we read Westerns. And June on the Range is returning. Now, to take part in June on the Range, all you gotta do is read a Western. That's all you have to do. That's not so hard. Just read a Western and you've taken part. But if you want the full June on the Range experience, I'll tell you what you gotta do. So, June on the Range, here it is. There are no weekly prompts, but you have to basically do this. Read one book by Zane Grey. One book by Zane Grey. Zane Grey used to be, at one time, an enormously popular Western writer. It's been a while, but he used to be. Then you have to read a book by Louis L'Amour. Louis L'Amour, who probably is still the most popular Western writer. I don't think he's been overtaken, really. So Louis L'Amour, you have to read a book by him, and man, he wrote a lot of books. So a book by Louis L'Amour, and then two books that are not by Louis L'Amour or Zane Grey. And most Westerns are pretty short, so shouldn't be too difficult. Of course, you can read Westerns from any time, anytime they're written. There are still Westerns being written, actually. They're still being written, a few of them, not many. Not like back in the old days. But man, there are a ton of them out there. And I have a whole posse of co-hosts that I'll link down below, and they're all taking part in this exciting event. And what are we reading this year for June on the Range? So we came up with a pile of books. I won't read them all. I won't read them all because I never read as much as I would like, because of life. All this real world stuff intruding upon my reading. But I did come up with I have a pile of books. My official June on the Range pile of books for 2024. And I'll work from this pile of books. First of all, I'm going to mention Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. Roger has a book club, and it's really cheap. All of Roger's picks are in the public domain. You can get them for free on Project Gutenberg if you want to. And for June, Roger's pick is Zorro. It's Zorro, which actually is a Western character. Zorro is a Western character. And we're reading the first Zorro story, The Curse of Capistrano, otherwise known as The Mark of Zorro. They changed the title when that really popular film, The Mark of Zorro, came out back in the olden days. And that's what we'll be reading. And this volume is The Complete Pulp Adventures Volume 1 by Johnston McCulley. There are 6 of these, actually. And in this first volume is that first story, The Mark of Zorro. And some other cool stories, too. So there are a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of stuff in here, I should say. Like Zorro Saves a Friend. Zorro Saves a Friend is in this book, too. We want to find out how Zorro saves his friend. Of course we do. Yeah, so, got pictures of Zorro in it. It's awesome. So, yeah, this is what we'll be reading for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club for June on the Range. There you go. But what about my Zane Grey pick this year? Well, I've decided what I'm actually going to read for Zane Grey is The Lost Wagon Train. It's The Lost Wagon Train. The copy that I have of Lost Wagon Train is pretty old. It's 1937. Yeah, it's 1937. The dust jacket has long since vanished. But The Lost Wagon Train, that is the book we'll be reading this year, or I'll be reading this year for June on the Range for Zane Grey. And I don't know anything about this book except that it's probably about a lost wagon train. Who knows? But I'm just guessing that's what this book is about. So there's that. Now the Louis L'Amour book that I'll be reading this year is this one. This is To Tame a Land. To Tame a Land. A classic of the West by the author of Hondo. By the time he was 20, Rye Tyler had killed 10 men. 10 men? Man, he doesn't mess around, the main character of this book. I think this is one of the earlier Louis L'Amour Westerns, I think. And I don't believe I've ever read it. It could be a little tough with Louis L'Amour because he wrote 1,000 books. He didn't, but he wrote a lot of books. And did I read To Tame a Land? I don't think I have. So I'll be reading this book, To Tame a Land, for Louis L'Amour, by Louis L'Amour. So that's my Louis L'Amour book. My Louis L'Amour book. Man, I can't speak this morning, Roger. It's too early in the morning. It's 3:20. So what else do I have to read this year? Well, I do have this book. This is the Pulp Western Anthology, Volume 1. This is edited by John Walker Blue. Blazing action from the golden age of Western pulp fiction. So I got this as a gift, and I've been intending to read it. June on the Range would be a great time to read this book. Has a bunch of old-timey Western pulp stories in it. So I'm thinking I'll be reading this one, I hope, in June. We'll see. I got a bunch of other books sitting here. I've got The Lone Ranger, by Fran Stryker. This is The Lone Ranger, the first volume of The Lone Ranger. This was a series. And I have quite a few of the series that Steve Donahue sent me. He found all of these at the Brattle Bookshop and sent me a bunch of Lone Ranger books, which is awesome. So I'm going to read this one, the first one, for June on the Range. I like The Lone Ranger a lot. Always have, ever since I was a kid when I used to watch that television show, The Lone Ranger. So there you go, The Lone Ranger. I'm going to be reading that probably. I've had this book lying around forever. This is Luke Short, Bounty Guns, which I've been intending to read for the last 2 June on the Ranges and just haven't. I bought this at the bookshop in Hayward, which means I've had this book for over 20 years. Over 23 years, actually. Probably more like 24. I've had this book a long time and haven't read it yet. So, yeah, I got to get on that. Here's another book that was given to me fairly recently. This is Gun Law for Lavercombe. Killer trailed killer to a blazing sundown. This is by Charles Alden Seltzer. This cowboy is facing the wrong direction. He's in a lot of trouble, I think. He might be drunk. Who knows? Anyway, this is Gun Law for Lavercombe. I'm definitely going to read this. This is definitely a book I'm going to read. So we've got that. But we've also got Vetchel Hauer's Stage to Painted Creek. Stage to Painted Creek. Which I got for 10 cents at Half Price Books. This cost me 10 cents. I've got to read it. The only way the marshal could save the stagecoach was to put guns in the hands of the 3 killers who were his prisoners, which just seems like a really bad idea, which could be why this book is so short. I could see things going very wrong in this book, but I want to find out what happens. So, The Stage to Painted Creek by Vetchel Hauer. This is a gold medal book. It's a gold medal book. So there you go. But we've also got another book that I got for 10 cents at Half Price Books, probably the same day. I've got Under the Badge by C. Hall Thompson. In this town, a lawman's star was just one more target. It's just one more target. All right, Under the Badge by C. Hall Thompson, which I got for 10 cents. What do I have here? I've got Bill Pronzini's The Gallows Land. The Gallows Land by Bill Pronzini. Also from the bookshop in Hayward. So again, I've had this for over 20 years and haven't read it. Pronzini is better known, I think, for his crime fiction than his westerns. And I don't know how well Pronzini is known nowadays at all. But he wrote this western. He did write westerns. And so I'll be reading this one. Hopefully, The Gallows Land. We'll see how June goes for me. But I've also got Posse from Hell. It's the Posse from Hell. It's from hell, this posse. They murdered the sheriff and turned the peaceful town of Paradise into blazing chaos. Now, all that stood between the town and a reign of terror was a green young deputy whose badge was only 8 days old. His badge was only 8 days old, and he's green. The deputy's green. It's Kermit the Frog, the deputy. We'll see. Posse from hell. See, now I'm going to be picturing that main character as Kermit the Frog. It'll make the reading more interesting that way. And the last book I have on the pile, and like I said, I probably won't read all of these books, though they are short, most of them. This is Brian Garfield's Apache Canyon, and as it lets you know, Brian Garfield was the author of Death Wish, which was probably a bigger deal at the time that this was published. So Brian Garfield's Apache Canyon. It's Apache Canyon. Yeah. So it's a canyon with Apaches, written by the guy who wrote Death Wish. So we'll see how this is if I get to it. Hopefully I'll get to it this year. Otherwise, it'll have to wait till next June on the range. We'll see. But isn't that an exciting pile of books? You can have your own exciting pile of books. June on the range. Woohoo! Woohoo! Anyway, there you go. Check out my thrilling co-hosts down below, who also should have announcement videos coming out within the next few days, I hope. And I will catch you next time.